Okay, everyone. This video, which is a short video, is to communicate how you can use hard power in the diplomatic simulation. Now, this diplomatic simulation, the objective is to advance your country's interests and to increase your power and capabilities. The team that does this best will get a slight increase in their grade for this simulation. Now, when we speak about power, we have soft power and hard power. The majority of this simulation will be about soft power. It'll be about negotiations where you guys engage in diplomacy. And you will find this diplomacy on the documents you downloaded, where you are negotiating over security and trade, and you find a document with lots of options that you can choose from. You negotiate which option you want to do, which you want to finalize with the other side. Now, diplomacy is really good for countries because you can develop alliances and goodwill with other countries. You can enter into international agreements which advance your interests and influence. For instance, by engaging in a trade agreement, you can take advantage of comparative advantage. So ultimately, soft power is actually connected to hard power. Soft power can increase hard power because by engaging in these agreements, you can start developing good relationships, which can become alliances and economic partnerships. However, you can use hard power instruments as part of your negotiating strategy. It does not just simply have to be about diplomacy and compromise and concessions. You can use the following actions to apply pressure on other countries to advance your interests. These actions include military attack. They include imposing economic embargoes. So using aggressive tactics, economic and military power to advance your interests. So hard power can be part of your negotiating tactics. You can use threats if you want, but be very careful. By using them unwisely, this might alienate potential allies and trade partners. So you need to be really careful. I would avoid constantly using hard power instruments because you're going to find yourself easily isolated by other countries. But they can be part of your arsenal of negotiations. So let's go through them and how it works. So during the negotiations, for instance, if things are going badly for China, or if you are China and you feel like other countries are treating you unfairly, you can do several things. One maybe is a small example of hard power. You can arrest Japanese or Asian nationals who trespass on islands that you believe are Chinese islands. There's an effect to each of these forms of hard power. Basically, every time you do one of these, it leads to the targeted country losing some power. So let me show you. Each country in this diplomacy negotiation is going to have a power ranking. So today, at the very beginning of the simulation, the US is the most powerful country and its power ranking is 16, and this is based on economic, military, and diplomatic power. We'll speak about this a little bit later, but you should also keep in mind that by 2030, the power distribution is likely to change. Now, China is 13. Japan is actually the weakest actor. It's 8.5. And ASEAN and South Korea are 9.5. So keep that in mind. If China arrests a Japanese official, what this means is Japan loses minus 0.25 in their power ranking. So Japan's power ranking moves from 8.5 to 8.25. The reason I've included this example is because this happens a lot in the South China Sea, where, there's so many islands that are under disputes between China and Philippines, Vietnam, etc. So this happens, and it usually causes a diplomatic fallout anytime it does happen. You could also escalate the tensions a little bit more, do something a bit more aggressive. So China can encircle these islands with its navy that are claimed by Japan in the East China Sea or Asian countries in the South China Sea. So if China does encircle these islands, the targeted country loses minus 0.5 to their power ranking. So if China does this to an Asian country's claim in the South China Sea, and ASEAN is 9.5, this will mean ASEAN power ranking moves from 9.5 to 9. And this strategy, if you remember from the video, is the cabbage strategy. An even more aggressive maneuver and hard power instruments is imposing an economic embargo on goods being sold to Japan, the USA, or Asian countries. To the targeted country, they would lose -1 power. So if China imposes an economic embargo on goods to the US, this reduces the USA's power ranking from 16 to 15. And this, compared to these, the fact that this is much higher is a reflection of China as an economic and trade giant. Another thing that China can do is declare an air identification zone over the South China Sea. What this means is that no planes can fly through the airspace without Chinese permission. This is a really aggressive move. This is basically saying that this is definitely China's maritime jurisdiction. So it's a very bold, aggressive move. And if China does this, China's power increases by 0.5. So from 13 to 13.5. If it's done over the East China Sea, Japan and USA, they both lose 0.5. If it's done over the South China Sea, ASEAN and the US both lose -0.5. And you can see an example of that here. The most aggressive thing that you can do is a military attack. So the Chinese military can attack the target, like opposition targets, like ships and territory. If you do this, we're going to do a little bit of a game where you have to roll a dice and calculate the odds. And I'll show you how we do that in just a minute. Just remember that war is very risky. It dramatically escalates tensions between countries, but it should not be ruled out as a policy option in these negotiations. So, if you decide to go to war, we spoke about the rolling the dice. And we also spoke about calculating the odds. Based on the current balance of power within Asia, I've come up with a matrix of the likelihood of success of China winning Taiwan, like militarily attacking Taiwan, a US ally. Now, what is important for this is you have to remember that reunification with Taiwan is a long-term, absolutely core, important objective of the Chinese foreign policy. Taiwan has a defense agreement with the US, and the probability of success in war is uncertain. You must make a calculated decision. If you, as China, decide to take control of Taiwan, which would be the ultimate victory, you need to look at the odds of success of winning. So, your guys are going to roll an online dice. Okay? So it'll be something like this. Go to Google, type in dice roll online. You can go to the top one. Make sure that it's 2 dice, and then roll it. Okay, so 7. You will do that with the people that you are attacking. And if you roll a 10 to 12, if China rolls a 10 to 12, China wins and Taiwan reunifies with the Chinese mainland. And what this does is the power ranking will change considerably. China will get +5, US gets -3. If neither side wins, if you roll between 7 and 9, which would be what the dice roll was, neither side wins and China and the US negotiate a peace deal, Taiwan's status remains unclear. The power ranking stays the same. If the USA and its Asian allies defend Taiwan successfully, you would have to roll a 3 to 6. So this is really bad for China. And this would mean that Taiwan declares independence. There is a 33% chance this happens. So ultimately, it's a very risky move. If you roll between 1 and 2, this is disastrous for China. China will lose the war so badly that the Chinese public will rise against it, the Chinese Communist Party, and a revolution will start in China. Now, if this does happen, the USA will be considered the ultimate power within Asia. China is in complete meltdown, and it's -5. So you need to, if you want to use this option of military attack, you have to follow this formula, okay? Rolling a dice, calculating the probability of success, and then changing the power ranking as a result. Now, the important exception to this probability of success is during the diplomatic negotiations, if China manages to persuade, that should say Japan. If China manages to persuade Japan or ASEAN to leave Pax Americana, so the US security alliance, these odds will change in China's favor. So China, if you manage to negotiate security, in particular security partnership agreements with ASEAN or Japan, that are highly favorable to China, and if you manage to persuade these countries to not negotiate security partnerships with the United States, contact me and I will change the odds that will be more favorable for you to win and successfully reunify Taiwan with the Chinese mainland. Okay, so that's important. If you manage to persuade Japan, I should say Japan, and ASEAN to join a Chinese security framework and leave the Pax Americana, these odds will change.